to be not feeding back. Is that what you use? Oh, is this something? And I want to thank the London chapter, which has been such an amazing chapter, and Tom here, and Ben, and Simon, and everybody that's been here this week. It's been a long day. I know I did that, just listening to all the wonderful information that's been coming forward from everyone. As I mentioned before the break, you tend to see a good deal of overlap in this type of content with some of the speakers, which I think is actually a good thing because it comes from different angles. And what I'm going to do in this presentation, arriving at a resource-based economy, I've made a number of lectures, and I try not to just blatantly repeat myself when I get into live scenarios. So this is an attempt, a different way to look at some of the central aspects of what defines a resource-based economy. As you know, there's plenty of material at zeitgeistmovement.com, if it wasn't mentioned earlier. The past 2 years, I think I've logged maybe 200 hours of radio show archives that can be downloaded for free, which answers tons and tons of repeated questions that come up. So if anyone's completely green to all of this, I do suggest going back and reviewing the massive amount of information that has been developing and is continuing to be developed, and it's freely available at zeitgeistmovement.com. All right, part one of this presentation is called a self-generating model, which will detail trains of thought that show a natural intellectual gravitation to the resource-based economic model. Too often I run into people who seem to view this concept as it's just creative, wishful thinking and abstraction. Or on the other hand, some type of derivative, an offshoot of some historical ideology. The reality, however, is that the concept really becomes quite self-evident in the relevant components of what comprises the well-being and social stability of our species and planet we live on. Part two, economic components defined. I'm going to more formally organize the components more or less suggested or arrived at in part one into an understandable system. A resource-based economy in its working state is really quite simple, deceptively simple, in fact, given the complexity, imbalance, confusion, and uncertainty of the monetary market system that we all endure today. Method, I will point out as I go on, that is completely decoupled from the natural world, from human beings. It exists as a mere abstraction floating in the air. In part three, objections and projections, which will hopefully be a little bit fun, I will touch upon some of the more common criticisms of this direction, along with what we, those of us that identify with this in a very sincere way, are likely to expect as this direction gains more attention across the world. I think it's really important we come to terms with the inevitable hostility, if you will, that arises when we broach the deep-seated subjects that we do. It's important to remember that we're all victims of culture, as has been pointed out by previous speakers. And while many people are indeed coming to terms with the growing social problems and do see the Zeitgeist movement, the Venus Project, and the resource-based economy as a viable solution, there are also many that have a very, very powerful identification with the current model, and in all seriousness view our work as an extreme threat to their identity, and it's something that unfortunately I think will grow. Then in part four, I will talk briefly about the transition, something that's also been alluded to very well. Come at it from a similar angle, a little more general. The complexity and lack of predictability it holds, of course, is often elusive to those that immediately hear about this information. Of course, ask the immediate question, how do we do it? Changing the world is not easy, especially when the concept presented is probably the most radical social shift the species has ever faced or considered. But this is why we're here. The core interest of the Zeitgeist movement is, in fact, actually the defining interest is to put our heads together, to work together, to figure out how to actually get this done. That's why we're here. If anyone, by the way, is simply waiting for me to tell them what to do, or anyone else to guide their way, I'm sorry you're going to be disappointed. The Zeitgeist movement is not a follow the leader movement. The only way this movement will work is if each one of you in this audience, each one of you listening to this webcast, each one of you viewing this event archive in the future, and sees the merit of this, is prepared to take the time and sacrifice to become an expert on this material and be able to transmit it to your fellow man in a fluid way. That's how. I ended two of my previous films with "The Revolution Is Now," and I want to clarify that the revolution is a revolution of thought. It's a revolution of creativity, of thought, ingenuity, a revolution of consciousness. So I want to just understand, make it very, very clear that this is an information-based movement. It's an enlightenment of understanding what can be if we care to. All right, part one, self-generating model. A wise man once said, the most profound understandings tend to be the most obvious yet overlooked. I want everyone to keep that in mind as I run down the following section. For as elementary as what I'm about to point out may seem, these issues are far from being given the relevance they actually deserve. You know, that of course mentality. Oh yeah, of course. Those who say that tend to not understand what you're saying. Natural law. A natural law is a property of what we call nature, or in effect the whole of the physical phenomenon around us to which we are symbiotically connected. Classic example is the law of gravity, of course. Doesn't matter how much faith I have to believe I can jump up right now and dance on the ceiling. The law of gravity simply won't allow it. And since the effects of gravity are also measurable and predictable, becoming a tool, this knowledge becomes the basis of inference, which we use to make more accurate decisions. Once this law was discovered, all sorts of possibilities began to emerge, and the world became a little bit more intelligent about what was possible and what wasn't when it comes to the phenomena related to it. It builds up upon, we build upon natural law. As another example, before the germ basis of disease was discovered by Louis Pasteur, there are many ineffective and outright dangerous treatments for human sickness, as anyone who studies medical history will know. In fact, we, of course, would look back at these strange and suspicious, often superstitious, in fact, methods, and wonder, how have we possibly been so misinformed? Yet, we seldom recognize this trend as a universal and how it applies to us today. Most rarely consider that many of our current modern practices might be in the same boat, to be looked back upon by future human societies, which will wonder, what the hell were they thinking? Didn't they see the natural law referent for that issue? Etc. The point here is that the evolution of scientific discoveries which always originate from feedback from the natural world, constantly refine our understanding, if, of course, we're open to receiving, which is a conversation in and of itself. It creates dependable, testable reference that we can use to assist in our reasoning about the problem's solution or even invention. The process of transfer or reason from a given law to be extrapolated to an extrapolated conclusion, is called inferential logic, as if anyone's ever studied these things in college. Nearly every man-made thing you see around you in the modern world is essentially a product of this reasoning. Everything. However, there is one area of human life, which we all have to admit, which goes virtually untouched by the natural law reference and the extrapolation of this reasoning. And that, of course, is our social system. Somehow, human organization is excluded here. For some reason, the social arrangement that we utilize goes untouched as evolution continues in information. It exists as one of the most dated practices of organization I think we have left, in fact. Now, again, I could break off in many different areas from this point in regard to how provably ineffective and archaic the whole of human social management is conducted, from our prison systems to the banking oligarchs that we blindly accept, to the grand distortion that I literally can talk for hours and hours on, and if any of you have seen my prior presentations, social pathology, I strongly suggest that that's not the point of what this presentation is about, because I want to hone in. For the sake of this short presentation, I want to narrow it down to one thing, and that's universal human needs. Throughout modern history, there have been, many throughout modern history have been trying to find a universal distinction for what we call human nature, a very